Victoria Allen, the head flight attendant with her hair neatly pulled into a tight bun, stood with her arms crossed, her cold gaze sweeping over the woman in front of her. Elena Carter, dressed in an elegant yet simple dress, remained composed despite the curious and judgmental stares from the other passengers. "Sorry, but this is first class. Would you kindly return to your proper seat?" Victoria's voice dripped with sarcasm, making no effort to check the passenger list. Elena looked up, her eyes sharp, yet her tone remained calm. "I have a first-class ticket. I belong here," Victoria scoffed, shaking her head in mockery. "The only mistake I made was letting you on this flight in the first place." A wave of murmurs rippled through the cabin. Some passengers turned away, pretending not to notice, while others watched eagerly, anticipating what would happen next. Elena slowly set her bag down, her gaze never leaving Victoria. Tilting her head slightly, she spoke in a steady yet piercing tone. "Are you sure about that? Next, we're diving deeper into this intense story. If you believe that everyone deserves to be treated fairly, regardless of their skin color or status, hit that subscribe button now to support this message. And don't forget to let us know which country you're watching from." The sound of high heels clicking against the airplane floor echoed as Victoria Allen, the lead flight attendant, walked with a confident stride. She flashed a radiant smile, her voice sweet and welcoming as she greeted the first passengers of the first-class cabin. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair. It's an honor to have you on today's flight." Mrs. Sinclair, a middle-aged woman with impeccably styled platinum blonde hair and an expensive designer outfit, nodded in approval at the warm reception. Victoria leaned in politely, carefully taking her coat as if she were serving royalty. Then, she swiftly turned her attention to a middle-aged man in an Armani suit, his neatly combed salt and pepper hair giving him an air of sophistication. "Mr. McAllister, I've arranged for your favorite wine. We hope you have a wonderful flight." The wealthy white passengers entered with an air of entitlement, welcomed as if they were VIP guests. The other flight attendants, though less obvious than Victoria, followed the same pattern of preferential treatment. Then came Elena Carter. She stepped onto the plane dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, her dark curly hair neatly pinned back. Her sharp features and smooth caramel-toned skin radiated confidence. But instead of the warm smiles from earlier, Victoria barely spared her a glance before narrowing her eyes. Her demeanor shifted instantly. She crossed her arms, her voice turning cold and dismissive. "First class is reserved for premium passengers. Economy is in the back." Elena showed no surprise at the attitude. She simply tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady as she observed Victoria. "I know exactly where I belong." Victoria pursed her lips, letting her eyes sweep over Elena's refined attire as if searching for a flaw, something to justify her assumption. But no matter how she looked, she couldn't accept the idea that this woman was part of the elite class. "I think you should check your ticket again, or I can help you find your way to economy." A few nearby passengers turned their heads, their gazes filled with silent judgment. Mrs. Sinclair smirked, leaning toward Mr. McAllister to whisper something, making him nod in quiet agreement. Elena remained unfazed. She calmly reached into her bag, pulled out her ticket, and placed it in Victoria's hand. "Perhaps you need to verify it." Victoria barely glanced at the ticket before shoving it back, a smirk playing on her lips. "No need. I know who belongs in first class and who doesn't. You are not one of them." Elena let out a small, knowing smile, her sharp eyes studying the woman before her. "Are you sure about that?" Victoria crossed her arms tighter, her expression defiant. "Absolutely. Then you might be making a very serious mistake." Elena's voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the air around them feel heavier. A strange silence settled over the first-class cabin. Victoria let out a mocking laugh, shaking her head. "The only mistake I made was letting you board this flight in the first place." Passengers began whispering among themselves, some exchanging amused glances, as if waiting to see how Elena would respond. But she didn't say another word. Instead, she calmly took out her phone, typed a quick message, and set it down on the armrest. The tension in the first-class cabin still lingered after the confrontation between Elena Carter and Victoria Allen. Some passengers stole curious glances, while others continued their conversations as if nothing had happened. Victoria bit her lip, Feeling a lingering frustration, she couldn't accept that someone like Elena was seated in first class. Part of it was prejudice. But another part was sheer arrogance. Victoria hated being challenged, especially in front of wealthy passengers. She pushed the service cart forward, her eyes flickering toward Elena, who sat calmly in the front row, poised as if nothing had transpired. That composure only irritated Victoria more. "What would you like to drink?" Her voice was cold. Elena looked up, meeting Victoria's challenging gaze. She smiled faintly, unshaken. "Just a glass of water." Victoria didn't respond. She simply poured a full glass. But instead of handing it over properly, she, accidentally, tilted her hand, causing the entire contents to spill directly onto Elena's dress. A few soft gasps rippled through the nearby passengers. Elena glanced down at her now soaked dress, then slowly lifted her gaze, her eyes sharp as ice. "Oh, I am so terribly sorry." Victoria feigned an innocent expression, covering her mouth slightly, but the smirk tugging at the corner of her lips betrayed her satisfaction. My hand slipped. Another flight attendant, Lisa, froze upon witnessing the scene. She glanced around nervously, noticing that while some passengers whispered among themselves, no one objected. After all, in their eyes, Elena wasn't one of them. Elena calmly reached into her bag, took out a napkin, and dabbed at the water on her dress, her movements slow, deliberate, unshaken. "Strange. I don't recall ordering a sudden rain shower." A few passengers chuckled at the subtle jab, but Victoria didn't find it amusing. On the contrary, Elena's composure only fueled her anger. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Victoria scoffed. "It's just water. It's not like your clothes are expensive enough to worry about." Elena tilted her head slightly, a glint of warning in her gaze. "Are you sure you want to take it this far, Victoria?" Victoria clenched her fists. There was something unnerving about Elena's voice, too calm, too certain, as if she were the one controlling this situation. That thought drove Victoria mad. "Who do you think you are?" she snarled. Then, smack, a sharp slap echoed through the cabin, plunging it into stunned silence. Lisa gasped. Several passengers widened their eyes in disbelief. Even Mrs. Sinclair lowered her magazine. Astonishment etched across her face. Elena remained seated, her head slightly turned from the force of the slap. But she didn't yell, didn't react in the way Victoria had expected. Instead, she slowly turned back, her gaze dark but unwavering. She gently touched her cheek, then let out a quiet, almost amused chuckle. "I'd say you've made an even bigger mistake now." Victoria took a shaky breath, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes locked onto her. Some passengers looked shocked, others entertained, but none of them intervened. In their world, if Victoria had treated Elena this way, she must have had a reason. But what Victoria didn't know was that in just a few minutes, she would regret everything. The tension in the first-class cabin still hung thick in the air after Victoria Allen's slap. The surrounding passengers, though silent, had their eyes fixed on Elena Carter, the woman who had just been so blatantly disrespected. But strangely enough, Elena didn't react the way Victoria had expected. She didn't yell, didn't look outraged or furious. She simply sat there, lightly brushing her fingers over the red mark on her cheek, her expression calm yet chillingly sharp. A strange silence settled over the cabin. Then, slowly, Elena turned to Victoria. "Do you realize what you've just done?" Her voice was low, quiet, but every word sent a chill down Victoria's spine. Victoria scoffed, trying to mask the unease creeping into her chest. "I just taught you a lesson about respect." "Oh, really?" Elena raised an eyebrow, a faint smile appearing on her lips, but it was anything but gentle. "Then allow me to teach you something in return, that every action has consequences." Victoria stiffened for a moment. That statement, though spoken with composure, carried an unsettling weight. A warning? A threat? She wasn't sure. But one thing was clear. Elena was not someone who could be easily trampled on. For the first time, a shiver ran down Victoria's spine. The passengers started murmuring amongst themselves. A few exchanged knowing glances, as if they were beginning to wonder, who exactly is Elena Carter? Mrs. Sinclair, a powerful figure in the financial world, set down her teacup, her sharp gaze lingering on Elena with newfound interest. Then, A subtle smirk played on her lips, one filled with intrigue. Meanwhile, Lisa, the flight attendant who had witnessed everything, turned to Victoria with concern. She gently tugged on Victoria's sleeve and whispered, "Victoria, I think you should apologize." Victoria yanked her arm away, glaring at Lisa. "Are you insane? I didn't do anything wrong." "But, mind your own business." Her words were firm, but deep down, unease gnawed at her. She had the sinking feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake, but she didn't yet know what it was. Elena calmly picked up the glass of water from the table, tilting it slightly in her hand. It was such a simple motion, yet it made Victoria feel an odd sense of dread. "I have a question for you." Victoria swallowed dryly. "What question?" Elena set the glass back down, then leaned in slightly. "Who do you think holds the most power on this flight?" Victoria blinked, then scoffed. "Obviously, the captain." "Oh, that's true, but, are you sure?" Elena's tone remained light, but something about it unsettled Victoria. The other passengers had gone silent, their attention fully absorbed by this peculiar exchange. Some had even stopped eating and drinking, completely drawn into the unfolding tension. Victoria crossed her arms, trying to regain control. "What exactly are you getting at?" Elena smiled. "Just wait and see." At that very moment, a passenger nearby cleared his throat. "Excuse me, but, are you Elena Carter?" A middle-aged man in an expensive suit turned toward her, his expression filled with curiosity and recognition. Victoria's eyes widened. "She's a nobody." But the man's next words left Victoria frozen in place. "If she is who I think she is, then she's one of the most influential investors in the tech and finance industry. A woman who can change the fate of a company with just a single phone call." Victoria's heartbeat stuttered. "No way." The whispers among the passengers grew louder. Some picked up their phones, quickly searching for the name Elena Carter. And within seconds, their expressions shifted, from curiosity to pure shock. A young woman murmured under her breath, "Oh my God, it's really her." Elena remained seated, neither confirming nor denying it. She didn't need to say anything. Victoria could feel it. The storm was coming, and she had brought it upon herself. The whispers spread through the first-class cabin like a slow-burning fire. The passengers who had previously looked down on Elena Carter now regarded her with a completely different expression. Some tried to hide their surprise, while others showed clear embarrassment upon realizing they had misjudged her. But no one was more shocked than Victoria Allen. She felt as if the ground beneath her was collapsing. This couldn't be happening. She had treated Elena like someone beneath her, someone unworthy of sitting in first class. But if what everyone was saying was true, then the woman she had just humiliated held more power than everyone on this flight combined. Victoria's heart pounded against her chest. She glanced at Elena, hoping to see hesitation, some sign that this was all a misunderstanding. But no, Elena simply sat there, calm as if she had expected this to unfold all along. At that moment, the cockpit door swung open. A middle-aged man in a pilot's uniform stepped out. The name tag on his chest read Captain Douglas. He walked toward the first-class section, his eyes scanning the scene before finally settling on Elena. And then, to everyone's shock, he bowed his head respectfully. "Miss Carter, I had no idea you were on this flight. Had I known, I would have personally welcomed you aboard." A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Victoria held her breath. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Elena gently placed her glass of water on the table and offered a small, knowing smile. "It's quite all right, Captain Douglas. I was hoping to enjoy a peaceful flight, but it seems someone had other plans." Her words weren't harsh, but they cut like a blade. The captain turned to Victoria, his once neutral expression now cold and stern. "Flight Attendant Allen, what exactly is going on here?" Victoria stammered, desperately searching for an excuse. I was just following protocol. She didn't seem like she belonged in first class, so I assumed there was a mistake. I was just enforcing the rules." Captain Douglas narrowed his eyes. "So you decided who belongs in first class without checking the passenger list?" Victoria swallowed hard. I thought." "You thought?" He emphasized the word. "Let me make something very clear. Flight Attendant Allen, Miss Carter isn't just a first-class passenger, she owns this plane." The shock hit like a lightning strike. The passengers were too stunned to speak. Some immediately bowed their heads in respect, while others simply gawked at Elena as if she were a deity descending from the heavens. But Victoria, she was frozen. She owns it? Her voice trembled. Captain Douglas nodded firmly. That's right. Miss Carter is one of the largest shareholders of the airline's parent company. If she wanted to, she could have any one of us fired, including me. The air in the cabin grew suffocating. Victoria felt ice creep through her veins, draining the warmth from her body. She looked at Elena again. But now, there was no defiance in her eyes. Only fear. She had humiliated the wrong person. Elena didn't rush to retaliate. She simply observed Victoria with an unreadable expression, like a predator deciding whether or not to finish off its prey. Victoria opened her mouth, desperate to salvage the situation. I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I never would have. Oh? Elena tilted her head slightly. So if I were wealthy, you would have treated me differently? Victoria froze. I didn't mean, but that's exactly what you just said. Elena rose to her feet, her gaze sweeping over the entire first-class cabin. I would think that a flight attendant should treat all passengers with respect, regardless of who they are. No one dared to argue. Elena turned to Captain Douglas. I don't want to ruin someone's career over a single mistake, but I also can't overlook blatant unprofessionalism and discrimination. Victoria held her breath, waiting for her fate. I'll leave it to the airline to decide her punishment. Elena continued, but as of now, she looked directly at Victoria. You are no longer permitted to serve in first class. It felt like a slap across Victoria's face. You can't do that. Captain Douglas sighed. Flight attendant Allen, return to the economy cabin. And when this flight lands, I suggest you prepare to meet with HR. Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but one look at the captain's firm expression told her there was no way out of this. With her face burning from humiliation and rage, Victoria reluctantly unpinned her name tag, gave Elena a stiff, begrudging nod, and then walked out of first class, defeated. The moment the door closed behind her, the air in the cabin felt lighter. The tension in the first-class cabin remained thick after Victoria was forced to step down from her position. But it seemed the matter was far from over. Elena Carter remained composed, but there was a chilling coldness in her eyes. She was not someone who easily forgave acts of disrespect. Just then, an announcement came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Douglas speaking. Due to technical issues, we will be making an emergency landing at the nearest airport. Please remain seated and follow the crew's instructions. The cabin buzzed with murmurs. Some passengers looked worried, but the more observant ones sensed that something was off. A luxury aircraft like this rarely encountered sudden technical failures. Yet, Elena remained completely unfazed. Victoria, now demoted to the economy cabin, sat hunched in her seat by the window. She no longer carried herself with arrogance. Instead, she was overwhelmed with growing dread. She knew Elena was powerful, but she hadn't expected her to be this powerful enough to force an unscheduled landing. Thoughts raced through Victoria's mind. Will I just get a warning? Or worse, will I lose my job? She tried to steady her breathing, convincing herself that things wouldn't escalate that far. But the uneasy feeling in her chest only grew stronger with each passing minute. Finally, the plane touched down at a private airport, where a group of senior airline executives was already waiting on the tarmac. The cabin door opened, and Elena was the first to step out, exuding an aura of authority that was impossible to ignore. A sharply dressed man approached her and bowed slightly. Miss Carter, we received Captain Douglas's report. We fully support your decision and are prepared to handle the matter accordingly. Elena nodded before turning to face Victoria. Other passengers disembarked as well. Their curiosity piqued. Some even pulled out their phones, ready to capture this extraordinary moment. Victoria remained frozen in her seat, her body stiff with anxiety. At last, a crew member approached her. Flight attendant Allen, please exit the aircraft. Victoria reluctantly stood up, her steps heavy, as if she were walking toward her own execution. The moment she stepped off the plane, she was met with Elena's piercing gaze. Elena crossed her arms, her expression unreadable, and spoke with finality. Miss Allen, I do not tolerate discrimination. Victoria scrambled to defend herself. But I was just, no excuses. You didn't just insult me. You displayed unprofessional behavior in front of passengers. Someone like you has no place in the aviation industry." Victoria's mouth fell open in shock. You're firing me?" Elena didn't hesitate. Precisely. The sheer weight of her words cut deep, slicing through Victoria's pride like a blade. Those who had gathered around could feel the gravity of the moment. Some of the airline staff exchanged knowing glances, as if they had seen this coming. Victoria's face went pale, her hands clenched into fists. "You can't do this to me," she spat. Elena raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to test whether I can?" Right then, one of the airline's HR directors stepped forward. "Miss Allen, per the executive board's decision, your employment is hereby terminated. Effective immediately. Please surrender your employee badge and uniform before leaving the premises." Victoria opened her mouth as if to protest, but no words came out. She had lost, not just her job, but her dignity, in front of dozens of onlookers. With her face drained of color and her eyes filled with defeat, Victoria slowly unpinned her employee badge and threw it onto the ground at Elena's feet. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice seething with rage. But Elena merely shrugged. "I have never regretted removing those who don't deserve to stay." With nothing left to lose, Victoria turned on her heels and stormed away, each step fueled by bitter resentment. She left the airport with her career in ruins. After the incident on the flight, Elena Carter's story quickly became the center of media attention. Social media was flooded with videos capturing the moment Victoria Allen was fired at the airport. Along with waves of praise for Elena, people called her the woman who taught the world about respect, and her image appeared on major news outlets everywhere. But for Elena, this was more than just a personal event. She knew that discrimination in the service industry didn't start and end with one flight attendant like Victoria. It was a far bigger issue, one that she now had the opportunity to address. A few days after the incident, Elena held a major press conference at the headquarters of Carter Aviation, the airline she owned. The press room was packed with reporters eagerly waiting for her statement. Cameras, microphones, and flashing lights filled the space. When Elena stepped onto the podium, she wasn't wearing an extravagant outfit. Instead, she chose a simple yet elegant dress. She wanted people to see her not as a powerful businesswoman, but as an ordinary person, just like everyone else. She took a deep breath and began. "First, I want to thank everyone for their attention to this story. But I'm not standing here today to talk about myself. I'm here to talk about something much bigger, respect." The room fell silent. Elena continued, her voice firm yet full of emotion. "In life, no one deserves to be mistreated because of their appearance, background, or financial status. Rich or poor, we all deserve the same level of respect. And in the service industry, this is more important than ever." The journalists scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Some reporters nodded in agreement. This isn't just about a flight attendant who acted inappropriately. It's about a system that needs to change. I don't just want to punish one individual. I want to send a message. No one has the right to look down on others simply because they believe themselves to be superior. A round of applause rippled through the room. Elena smiled, but there was still a seriousness in her eyes. "That's why, today, I am announcing a new policy at Carter Aviation. Effective immediately, all our employees, from pilots and flight attendants to ground staff, will undergo retraining to ensure they provide service with respect and equality. There will be no place for discrimination in my company." The press room erupted into applause. Elena wasn't just giving a speech, she was starting a revolution in the aviation industry. Soon after the press conference, her statements dominated the media. Other airlines began reviewing their customer service policies. Major corporations in the service sector felt increasing pressure to make changes. Carter Aviation became the gold standard for a fair and progressive airline. Passengers who had previously experienced discrimination also started speaking out, sharing their own stories. A new movement emerged, one demanding equal treatment in all service experiences. As for Victoria Allen, she disappeared from the public eye after her termination. No one knew what became of her. But one thing was clear. She had become a cautionary tale for those who shared her mindset. A month after the incident, Elena received a special letter. It was from a 16-year-old girl named Sophie Martinez, a teenager working part-time at a small cafe. She wrote about how she was often treated poorly by customers simply because of her modest background. But after reading Elena's story, she found the courage to stand up for herself and demand the respect she deserved. Elena read the letter in silence, a soft smile appearing on her lips. She didn't seek fame. She didn't need praise. But she knew she had made a difference. Her story wasn't just about a confrontation on a flight. It was a spark that had ignited real change. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future content. And most importantly, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. What was your favorite part? Is there anything you'd like to see in the next video? Let's chat. See you in the next one.